He is one of the most important characters in a series of more than 1,000 chapters, yet we barely know a little about the one who was known as the best pirate of a generation, Gold Roger. Fortunately, in recent chapters new information was revealed about this character, enough to give us an idea of who he was, and enough to connect some clues that Ada had left us throughout his story. If we can understand anything about Roger, it's that he was an outstanding pirate. With a personality that communicated greatness, Roger had an immense capacity for focus. His goals were always present in his mind, and to get where he got to in terms of power and renown, means he had discipline and willpower beyond the normal. His second-in-command mentions that Roger liked to stamp a touch of style and flamboyance on everything he did. He was a unique man in many ways and was not afraid to show it. Roger's ambition was so palpable that he inspired and captivated hundreds of people he met during his lifetime. The pirate showed such great determination that men with conqueror's haki chose to serve him. In short, Roger was a monster even among monsters. Another point I liked about this character is that even though in some ways he was like a child who was always playing and looking for new ways to have fun, Roger also turned out to be much smarter and more of a planner than he appeared to be. It wasn't all spontaneity and simplicity. He showed a capacity for strategy and the ability to fight his opponents using his mind and his plans. One thing we must be clear about is that Roger's goal was not to be Pirate King. That was a title the world bestowed on him when he conquered the last island. So if being king wasn't his dream, what was? It seems to me that it has never been specifically stated, but I believe that Roger's goal was the same as Luffy's, to be a man with complete freedom to choose how to live and have adventures. The difference is that now that the title of Pirate King exists, Luffy can name his dream of freedom after it, whereas in Roger's time, there was no concept of a king until the world invented it for him. It is very obvious that Luffy and Roger are similar, but this does not mean that they necessarily have the same goals or that they are identical in all aspects, so I think it is necessary to clarify that in this case I think they do share the same dream. I base this mainly on the fact that when Luffy explained to Ray what is the meaning of being a pirate king for him, Ray seems satisfied and even melancholic with Luffy's answer, and as Shanks had already told him, Luffy really reminds them of Roger. If we continue talking about the differences between Roger and Luffy, we can find some. Roger has been seen to use plans to achieve his goals. In general, Luffy prefers to decide on the fly and never makes plans himself. Roger did leave a fairly elaborate plan that we will talk about later. In addition, Roger seems to have a taste and interest in history and the mysteries of the world. In a way, Roger is not only a pirate but also an anthropologist. Recall that he was willing to beg Whitebeard to let Odin travel with them, and thus complete his research. On the other hand, Luffy has not been seen as interested in this. If he enjoys the cultural surprises that give him the adventures in each new island, but has not been seen to actively study about the history or anthropology of the world of One Piece. We know that Luffy will end up learning about that history and participating in it, but this is because his crew includes Nico Robin. Maybe these differences have to do with age, that is, a more adult Luffy if he could have interests like Roger's. But for the moment there are some differences, and in my opinion it is better that these characters are not identical. I prefer that each one is his own person and that Luffy makes his own decisions without blindly following Roger's footsteps. Roger is the eternal traveler who is not comfortable with other people running his life. Freedom and exploration are the foundations on which his life is built. The life of a pirate is definitely the best option for men like Roger. But even among pirates there are differences in life ideologies. Roger is a character with a firm moral code, and even though he has an invincible will, he does not achieve his dreams by harming innocents. He had no problem with defeating enemies or people he considered criminals. He had a spirit reminiscent of a beast and could strike fear into his opponents. Roger was a combination of power, ferocity, honor and consideration for the good of others. His ideology of life is similar to that of Dragon, Luffy, and Garp. People should live in freedom, be able to pursue their dreams, create their own identity, and respect a basic code of morality. Roger was against the totalitarianism of the world government. Although Whitebeard was as strong as he was, I see Roger as the greatest man of his time because of the magnitude of his ambitions and the accomplishments he achieved. Near the end of his life, Roger learned that he has a destiny, but even that destiny was not set in stone. He was not a slave to that path. He had the freedom to decide whether to follow it or not. In his case, although he did want to fulfill that destiny, things did not fall into place in the right way and he contracted a disease that did not allow him to be alive when the other necessary people were born, among them the mermaid princess. As any man who chooses to be a pirate should, Roger was at peace with the idea that he could die at any time. Even before he knew of his illness, Roger must have accepted the possibility of death as a risk to having such a majestic life as the one he sought. The fact that he had become ill does not seem to have diminished his determination, and he simply saw it as a pity that he could not be the one to fulfill Joy Boy's will. But at the end of the day, Roger lived as he chose, had excellent adventures and companions, and left an impact on the world not seen in hundreds of years. Odin's reaction to learning how Roger died is, to me, the best evidence of the greatness of his life. But no person makes it to the top of the world alone. Roger made relationships with other characters who were themselves off the charts and got better because of them. In Whitebeard he found someone with the same potential for greatness and power. He was a man with whom he could measure how far he had progressed each time they met again. They were not competitors of the same dream, nor were they antagonists to each other. He was simply another monster in his own way who inspired Roger to be a greater pirate. Roger seems to have developed a strong respect for Newgate, to the point that he felt he should tell him the secrets of the world he had discovered in Laugh-Tale. They differed in the kind of ambitions. Whitebeard arguably desired fewer things, but did so with the same intensity as Roger. His dreams were smaller, but he pursued them as hard as Roger. In Odin he found a man as wild as he was, with a love of combat, a hunger for adventure, a desire to know the world and the traits of a king. Moreover, these two turned out to be linked by the history of their ancestors, Roger being the heir to the will of Joy Boy and Odin having the knowledge to read the poneglyphs. In Ray he found a brother. Another man with the traits of a king, but this was a king willing to follow him as his right-hand man. Someone of Roger's caliber surely did him good to always have a friend close by who was almost on his level. Thus he avoided the loneliness of being extremely strong and feeling alienated from the common people. In Ray he also found an adventurer willing to travel the world, but being more serious, he complemented Roger's sometimes childish personality. In Garp he learned that not all enemies are evil, not all men in search of order are oppressors of freedom. He found a like being, an equal in hunger for freedom, an equal in the level of his will, even if each used different methods to achieve his dreams. It seems to me that Garp was key to Roger's understanding that freedom without limits and without morals can result in something harmful to the world. Garp's sense of justice showed Roger that one must also care for the common citizen, and have a form of order in the world. This intersection of their ideologies allowed them to team up to defeat the most notable anarchist of that generation. In Xebec he found his most dangerous enemy. Someone who corrupted Roger's dream and made all pirates look like violent men. If Roger wanted to make the world understand that there could be a state of freedom and morality more suitable to live, Xebec was to be his greatest obstacle, because although he also sought freedom, he forgot about morality. With this the world government could take Xebec's methods as proof to say that this was the way all pirates lived and convince the world that they should be stopped. Thanks to this character, I think Roger came to understand that morality cannot be put aside in the pursuit of freedom. Not all forms of freedom are beneficial to the world. Even the purest ideals can cause great evil if used in the wrong way. It is not yet fully known what Roger's life consisted of, and to what end he did what he did in the last years of his life, but here is my explanation of Roger's actions after he learned the secrets of the world. Once he discovered the true history of the world, Roger learned that he was the heir to Joy Boy's will, a will that consisted of supporting freedom and pursuing dreams. Also, he understood that the world government has been using unethical methods to keep the entire world under its control for hundreds of years and is violating aspects that Roger believes should never be stopped. These aspects are mentioned in the 100th chapter of the manga, the inherited will, dreams of men and the passage of time. As I said, the government is altering these three aspects to stay in power, but the explanation of how it does it I will leave for another video about the world government. Roger understood that it is necessary to correct these evils of the government. He understood his role in history and wanted to accept it. Unfortunately, he and his crew reached the goal too soon. To fulfill the will that was inherited to him by Joy Boy, Roger needed other factors beyond his control. For example, he needed the help of the mermaid princess who could control the Sea Kings. That is, the ancestral weapon Poseidon. That's why they asked the mermaid who sees the future, how much time was left for Otohime to be born and ready to command the Sea Kings. That's when they realized that Roger's illness would not allow him to wait so many years. But Roger did not give up, even though he knew he would not be in charge of freeing the world from the government. He wanted to help the next heir of Joy Boy and left everything ready for him to fulfill that mission. The biggest obstacle that Roger saw for the fall of the government was that it was the same government that controlled the history and knowledge of the people. Just as they did with Xebec, the government could have erased Roger's name from history and thus prevented the further spread of man's hunger for freedom. That is why Roger came up with a grandiose plan to damage the government, support the next Joy Boy and plant in every person in the world the idea of freedom. Before reviewing his plan, it is necessary to make clear that it is speculated that two Joy Boys cannot exist at the same time. If this is true, we understand that for the next Joy Boy to be born, which in this case is Luffy, it was necessary for Roger to die. As Roger already had a disease, he was destined to die soon, but not satisfied with that, he devised a way to die that would allow him to achieve even more goals. Now, let's move on to his plan. When Roger conquered all the islands, the world began to call him Pirate King, and the rumor of his great treasure, the One Piece, began to spread everywhere. Ray mentions that Roger was surprised by this and that. Normally, a title would not have interested a man who was close to death, but Roger saw in that title of Pirate King something else. He saw an opportunity to create a plan. Roger had already managed to escape the government throughout his life, but if he died hiding on an island, the world government could have taken advantage of his death to erase his name from history or to distort the truth and lower the morale of people seeking freedom by saying that they had murdered the Pirate King. Roger wanted to avoid this, and the first part of his plan was to allow himself to be captured by the Navy. There was more than one reason to let himself be captured. First, so he could have access to talk to Garp, his old opponent, without anyone suspecting his encounter. After all, it is not uncommon for Garp to visit the cell of what was supposed to be his greatest enemy, at least in the eyes of the government and the world. Roger needed this meeting that would not raise suspicions, to ask Garp to take care of his son. Having a son can also be seen as part of Roger's plan. He spent practically all his life without seeking to have a family. It just seems that it was not part of his goals, and it was until the last year of his life, when he already knew the secrets of the world and when he was already devising his plan, that he decided to have a child. Let's remember that Roger mentioned to Ray that he hoped that the new Joy Boy, the one who would find the One Piece, would be his son. That's why it seems that having a son was also part of his plan to overthrow the government and leave everything ready for the new Joy Boy. Ironically, it was not his son who was the new Joy Boy, but the grandson of his friend and opponent, Garp. I'm not trying to say that the only reason for Ace's existence was to be a pawn in Roger's plan. I actually think that during the last few years he shared with Odin, Roger understood the importance of family, and understood that the right way to inherit your will and dreams is through your children, and not with the immoral methods used by the government. Although he dedicated his life to adventure and exploration, Roger also understood that family also has value. Back to the plan, besides talking to Garp, Roger allowed himself to be captured because he knew he would be publicly executed to scare the pirates of the world, but this public execution also gave him the opportunity to leave a message to the whole world. A message that not even the world government could hide. As we have all seen, the message that Roger left was to tell the world that his treasure, the One Piece, exists, that everything is on the last island and that it will belong to whoever finds it. With this message, Roger achieved several objectives at the same time. First, He prevented the government from using his death to diminish the world's desire for freedom or to erase him from history. Roger made himself unforgettable with that speech. Second, it inspired hundreds or thousands of pirates to search for his treasures, which automatically turned them into obstacles to stop the world government from dominating everything at the expense of people's freedom. It is mentioned that the flame of Roger's life became a fire that encompassed the whole world. Roger awakened their desire to be free. Most people in that world do not realize that they are enslaved by a government that abuses power. It is as if they are asleep and simply accept what the government tells them is the right thing to do. By the way, we saw that another extremely important character witnessed this speech, and from that day on he created an army that fights for freedom. This is no coincidence. Roger knew what he was doing, but we will talk about him another day. The third objective that Roger achieved, he created a world in which it is valid to have dreams and pursue them, so that when the new Joy Boy was born, he would also follow that path. Let's remember that being the new Joy Boy does not ensure that he will fulfill what the original Joy Boy wanted, or what Roger wanted. After all, we already saw that Roger could not fulfill that destiny because of his illness, so Roger wanted to make sure that Luffy would seek to be king and discover the truth along the way. Ray mentions that he shouldn't explain to Luffy what they found out, that it's better for them to find out for themselves and come to their own conclusions. Furthermore, he tells them that if he revealed it to them at the time, it would do no good as they would not be able to change things. In other words, they were still too weak. Ray knows that it is during that path of discovery where Luffy and his friends will become strong enough to be able to fight the government, and it is also on that path where they will meet the allies needed to fulfill Roger's plan, such as the Mermaid Princess. With this we confirm that Roger's crew is still waiting for the new Joy Boy. They know that Roger's death was just another step towards the liberation of the world. When Ray tells a bit about the last days of Roger's life to Luffy and his crew, Usopp mentions that it seems as if Roger had planned the new era of piracy. If you go back through that entire conversation, Ray constantly flashes smiles that hide something and keeps suspicious silences. He didn't want to reveal everything to Luffy. He knows he should let them move forward alone, but Usopp seems to have gotten it right. The great age of piracy that now exists is part of Roger's plan. Roger turned out to be a genius strategist, who by allowing himself to be captured made the government believe they had the upper hand, when in fact, publicly executing Roger was the worst mistake they could have made. In the present we see that they already know that they are on the brink of catastrophe. They even mention that a new great cleansing is necessary. It is likely that they mean that they will try to do what they did in the past, erasing much of history, what is now known as the empty century. Another moment that supports these ideas is when, before dying, Whitebeard, a man who knows the whole truth, basically did the same as Roger, lit the fire of freedom, announcing to the world that the One Piece exists. How do you define an immeasurable man? How do you describe an uncontainable spirit? Roger represents this idea of the infinite. He is the goal to follow for pirates who are already at the top. The human spirit can always want more adventures, more achievements, more love, or more obstacles that will make you stronger. Roger is the personification of the unattainable. Between achievements and legends, his life was captured in the history of the world and became the trigger for many men to embark on the journey to find the meaning of freedom.
俺の財宝か？欲しけりゃくれてやる。探せ！この世の全てをそこに置いてきた。